Good evening, Holliston, and welcome to the January 4th, 2024 meeting of the school committee. It looks like maybe we have a light agenda, but we'll see how the meeting goes. So we'll call us to order. Then I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda, which is just to approve the minutes from December 21st.
Moved by Cynthia. Seconded.
All in favor? All right, that passes 5-0. Next, we are moving right along to our communications and report from our student representatives. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So starting off DECA districts, the competition is starting next week.
And this week, the new course teacher started.
Who is that?
1 second. I have the name.
It's okay. If you don't, it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, so for the Club Science Olympiad, the invitational competitions are coming up. You can go ahead.
And then finals for the first semester are coming up in the next few weeks.
Yep. And the attendance policy previously in the handbook is being enforced starting this week. That's it.
That's it.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much. Individual comment from the school committee.
Nothing for me. I mean, hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy New Year.
Lisa?
Happy New Year.
We are such a chatty bunch today. Okay, public comment. I see that we have no public here, so we'll move on from that. And Mr. Boudet, I'm sure you probably wanted a little bit more time to prepare, but we are 13 minutes ahead of schedule.
What
Yep.
we're going to do is song dance VA.
So fiscal year 25 budget presentation.
Yeah, so the third part of our budget presentation, the special ed accounts, is contained in your packets. As you can see on the board, many of the things we're just level funding, the resources are substantial enough for us to conduct business. I highlighted the transportation services just because that was the biggest unknown coming into this, and up until a week and a half ago, when we locked in all the rest of our transportation accommodations for our out-of-district students, that we realized how bad the number's going to be. It was after we did the last budget update, and so you'll see in the next budget update that number is going to go the wrong direction. But so you see a rather large increase there, which is really kind of a 2-year increase. We're underfunded in 24, and then a subsequent increase for 25 we're anticipating. So
we are seeing impacts to this year's budget.
we will see an impact of this year's budget now. So that totals up at about $500,000, and then the tuition accounts again add up to another just under $400,000. So the net of it all would be $922,000 increase in our special ed accounts, 30% in those areas, and 2.3% to the overall budget. And again, this is level services, affectionately known as run rate. So this is doing nothing new, nothing spectacular. The biggest thing that we have seen is the dearth of options for doing out-of-district transportation. We used to do a lot doing out-of-district transportation. We used to do a lot through Project Accept, one of our collaboratives, and they are one step away probably from getting out of the transportation business because of all the struggles they're having. In addition, many of the costs are higher due to the fact that we have to add monitors on the vans based on the behaviors on the vans as well. So it's just been compounded by rates that are increased because of COVID and the lack of people that drive. So these private companies have to spend more to attract if they're going to stay in business, and those costs get passed directly on to us. We're hopeful that going forward, when Circuit Breaker, because transportation is now part of Circuit Breaker, it's the second part of Circuit Breaker. The state fully funds the tuitions first. They go through the process, and once they've met the 75% of tuitions, then they do transportation up to 75% of the cost of those as well. So it's secondary. They threw a bunch more money at it this year. Well, hopefully it'll get us into that transportation component. My expectation is that there'll be a lot of pressure on the legislature next year to increase it significantly because of this exact issue. We're not the only district that's having this problem. I can attest that as my peers and I talk about this often, about other options, who do you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something we used to be able to do for a reasonable rate is now, I would virtually say, unreasonable. We're currently looking at other options, and what I mean by that is we may be bringing some transportation back in-house, which we had gotten out of because it's been so difficult to find drivers. But if we pay the rate that they're paying to get drivers, maybe at that point we'd be able to pick up one or two routes internally. We do have one van that we'd have to convert to a 7D. That's what we need to do student transportation, which would make it unavailable for in-school unless you had a 7D license. So where now they can use that. But again, that's stuff we have to work out. But right now, in a budget situation that we're in, and I don't want to say crisis, but a budget situation that we're in, we have to start looking at other options.
Yeah, these are the numbers based on the students we have today.
Yes.
So basically almost $1 million just increase in special ed costs.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, some of this is driven by increase out of districts, but a lot of it's just driven by the
Much of it is the mechanics of and reality of what we have to pay to our contractors who service our students.
So
A transportation too, not an educational service.
So combine this with what we looked at last week, or the 21st.
Yep. So the 21st, again, we had in our first portion of the budget, we had an increase of $399,000 for the other fixed costs, for the non-special ed, non-payroll costs. So we're now at about 1.3 million without counting payroll yet. So
And that
Without what?
without counting payroll, no payroll impact
and
yet.
that's a 3.25%.
Yes,
I'm doing the math right.
3.25, about 3.25% over year-over-year budget.
Before payroll,
Before payroll.
because we split the budget into three parts.
3 parts,
But
correct.
only two of them.
Correct.
The private tuition increase,
Yep.
is that increased, is that tuition increases, like the schools are raising their rates, or is
We-
that
we-
kids?
Combination.
You'll see at the bottom that we talk about a 5% increase is what we're assuming. We haven't gotten the data information. We haven't got the information yet, Lisa, from the state on what they're going to allow for increases. So we made a 5% assumption. Last year was 14%. So, or I should say this year, for the fiscal '24 budget, it was a 14% increase. So, that's what we're looking at there.
So I think there's a couple things that have been happening. You saw when Jess Beatty had presented that the numbers were up. The pre-COVID dilemma, I think, that we're in. However, where we are right now, this is based on the kids we have. There's also hope that it could go the other way and we could bring some kids back. But there's always the unforeseen that you could also get some kids going out, which would lead to an increase here too.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. The kids that are going out, is there any cohorts that we could develop programs for and bring back in? Like, I know kids go out, I mean, I know my own situation, but I don't know everyone else's situation. Like, I don't know why kids go out of district and what sort of programs they're accessing.
Well, it's usually because there is not a peer alignment, right? You may have a student that doesn't identify students with similar protocols, and the parents and the IEP services are aligned with the needs of the student, because if you don't have a cohort that they can identify and work with, it's
Right,
then-
but if you have higher number of kids going out, it makes it more likely that there's some
it could. but
cohortable.
Right now, it's not, but I mean, that's one of the
Okay.
reasons we added back this position. We added the position at the high school to continue our pathways, not our pathways, our continuum
Continuum,
program,
right.
because we're trying to build back that
The
program.
capacity.
Right, but, you build it, they will come, but it's not the first, you know what I mean? You have to
Yeah.
kind of manage that as you go. So it would be tough to now add the positions based on what we have now, because we don't have.
Not knowing if you
yeah,
can bring those kids back
right.
in.
Especially with the uncertainty we're in.
Yeah.
It would be challenging.
And Lisa, do remember too that, we have a 48-month range that we can have in a classroom.
Yes.
So, especially like at the high school where, you're dealing with students possibly from 9th grade through, age 22, you'll cross that 48 months, so they can't be assigned to a classroom, an educational classroom at the same time.
I don't foresee right now, based on my conversations, Jess, that there is a population, as you're suggesting, because we have we've been working to really align the programs that we have currently. So I think we've been able to maintain the students in-house as much as possible. There is, like I said, there is some hope. I don't know when we'll know that some of our students may come back, but that's a wild card right now.
Yeah.
And we may have some students that are out, that are being,
But, to
moving
Lisa's
on, right?
point, if we're spending another, $500,000 on transportation to send people out, could we invest $500,000 in-house?
But the 500,000 is spread over every child and
No, I
every
know.
program
Right.
in multiple
I
places.
know.
So
Right.
even if you raise,
No guarantee that
No, I know that. I'm just saying,
that's
like,
the
to your
problem.
point about, like,
Yeah.
if we can identify a cohort.
Let's say you'll be able to bring back
tracking
3 or
it.
4 students to it. Let's just say you
Yeah.
had a protocol like that, you could bring 3 or 4 students back. That's only probably cutting off
But what's
how
the
much.
viability of that
And again,
long-term?
and-
Yeah.
And then how do you hire the teacher?
Yeah.
Right.
And do remember that, at least on the tuition side, every time you bring a student back, the following year, you're going to lose reimbursement. And I'm not saying you send kids out to get reimbursed, but it's not dollar for dollar.
So the initial
75%
startup
above the
cost.
4 times the foundation, right?
Exactly.
So if you're spending 100,000 on an out-of-district placement, right?
Right.
Our foundation is
About 50 grand.
Well,
At 4 times about 50 grand.
So the reimbursement is
75% of 50.
37.
Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, what you see is like the initial startup cost could be 200,000.
And it's a
you're not
gamble.
gonna-
You don't know if it's going to work.
Which is, if you remember, I think you were on the committee, Lisa, at the time, when we started the transition program at the high school, we used earmark money.
Yeah.
Senator Spilka's earmark money
Yeah.
to start up that program. There are significant expenses. And we then did the same thing the following year with the Rest Stop program down at the elementary. So it's, again, you need that seed money, and you have to have the cohorts, you want to do it if the cohorts are available, not hopeful that they're going to get there.
But there is another
Sure.
option that we're trying to work toward too, that Justin and I have talked about, is that if we have openings, can we offer them to another district too, and bring some money in that way too? If you don't have a large enough cohort, but there's some students, we don't want to also compete with like our Accept in Tech, because we're part of that. So you're trying to weigh all of that. Like Hopkinton built a new program, but I don't know where they ended up with it. So it just that those first year or two, it's you can't absorb it right away, especially when you're in a situation where the finances aren't great.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do think we need to work with MASS, MASC, our state representative, our senator, to push for increased funding, especially in the transportation, and maybe other sources of relief there.
Again, again, they have to fund more of it, that's all. I mean, I know there's a big push.
Well, circuit breaker was fully funded last year on the
For
tuition.
circuit breaker, actually fully funded for both tuition and transportation for last year's claims that are being paid
Right.
this year. So that's,
So maybe the formula needs to change.
there was not much available to consider for that. They actually have a high expectation this year of extraordinary relief claims. They've been very vocal about that this year, so we'll see how that turns out.
Keith, my concern is actually with the asterisks and whether it's too low. And I know you briefly addressed this with Lisa, but it is a 5% net increase assumption. Last year was a 14%. When do we get to find out what the percentage increase is? When does,
We'll hear from OSD that that's something that comes through the OSD process, where they then have to get it approved by the State House.
but what's the timeline?
It should be soon.
Like February, though? March?
Soon. I'm not going to commit to a month.
When did we find out about the 14%?
14% was early last year because the private schools were very vocal on how much they've fallen behind, and they may have to stop accepting students, so they threatened to shut their doors in some ways to new students. So that was an effective strategy for them to get the legislature. And truthfully, they had been being given grossly underfunded increases if you compare it to the cost of living, say. They had years where they were 0. There were years they were 0.5% and 1%. So they had fallen behind. Wasn't happy at the 14%. I would love to have seen it stretched across a few years, like 3 years of being higher. That being said, I don't think that the 14% was, over a period of time, adding the other ones was an unreasonable piece. And don't quote me on this, because I'll have people throwing rocks at me and from my professional group, but
But you used 5% because that was the average prior to the 14%?
I use 5% because in speaking with my peers, that's kind of what we're all doing. That's kind of the tone we're getting. The increase for the foundation budget itself was, the COLA was 5.17, 5.16, so we're in the range.
Okay.
So
the increase to this budget of $922,314 is subject to the 5%, which could be more.
5% is built in there,
Okay.
plus a couple of students
And
who are new, a
the
couple
number of
of
students could rise or fall.
Well, again, this is based on the current projection for next year.
That's always the unknown.
You know, we may get good news, you know, we may have, you know, lucky enough that, or we build enough of capacity here and talent or program here that we can bring some students back. Students may meet their goals out and out of district placements to be able to return, or we could get a move in tomorrow.
The increase of over $500,000 on transportation services for those out-of-district placements, that's a set number though, right? That's not an estimate?
That's an estimate. Everything
It's an
here is an
estimate.
estimate.
Okay.
It's not an estimate for the increase in '24, it's just unfortunately we're absorbing it in the '25
Right,
budget because of,
It's,
so that's,
again, yes, I mean, we don't know where kids are going to be, how many are going to be out, and what rates we may be able to see from different places. The person who does this does check regularly. I've been seen, as long as the police aren't listening, I've been seen taking photographs, driving around of other companies I've never heard of who are doing this now, and she has called in to look for capacity. So we're always looking. So it's not, you know, we're not sitting by and just, you know, being willing. People that know me know that spending money is not, you know, part of my DNA, so.
It's literally all you do.
The belief that I need to spend more money is not part of my DNA.
That's literally your job.
This is, okay, so we've now gone through special education, we've now gone through sort of the operations, the utilities, and the regular transportation. Are there, I mean, I know we've got 3-4 contracts.
Right now, we have 4 contracts that are subject to, are being negotiated.
Within the rest of the budget, are there other things that are already contractual? Known costs?
You talking about payroll?
Well, I
You're
guess
talking about- I mean, payroll we haven't done. I mean, there is, what, one contract that is settled? One? Or two? One contract that's settled right now.
Okay.
So that's the only other one. And no individual contracted people have a built-in raise, so.
3.25 before we do anything.
Are there any other questions on
Thoughts?
Many, but
Anything you'd like to share with the class?
we just cry.
yeah. It's grim.
Yep.
Okay, I have to digest. I'll reach out to Keith separately.
All right. Mr. Burnett, anything else on the fiscal year 25 budget?
I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Central Administrators update.
I just have a few quick updates that I was asked to remind you of. The Equity Steering Committee is starting Monday night, January 8th, here in the library. Are you coming, Sarah? Great. So Mr. Renee is excited to start that work and dig in. He's got a great team coming forward, a large team, but I don't have the list, but he's got a good group of people coming together, so we're excited for that to begin. What's that?
He said Renee.
Did I say
I'm
Renee?
sorry. I thought
Okay.
you said bidet. I'm sorry. I thought you said bidet. I apologize.
And then also coming up for families through CPAC, our Student Services Administrator, and I think some of her team, is going to be presenting Demystifying Dyslexia on 1/11 at CPAC, starting at 6:30 p.m. via, I think it's a Zoom or hybrid. I think it's hybrid, so it may be here, but also on Zoom if I remember correctly, but the link will be going up. And then the Holliston Coalition Against Hate and Bias that I'm co-facilitating with Travis Ahern, our town administrator, is on January 16th So that group will be coming together so we can determine next steps and how we can expand that group. I've also looked out for a facilitator. I haven't been able to find someone to come in that can help us facilitate with the larger group yet, but I did get a name today, so I'm going to reach out to them and see if it's some, because I think that would be really helpful if somebody from the outside could come in and give us a different lens, and then we could bring in a larger forum and have them help manage that for us. So that's where we're trying to go, but I'll stay tuned, and we'll know when you'll probably be at the next meeting. Oh, okay, well. We'll keep you. Okay, we'll keep you posted on that. One other thing, and it was last minute, and I apologize for the delay, but I did ask Lisa, as part of my updates, to add to your packet. The executive director for tech is Emily Parks, as of July 1st this past year, and she had asked that we share her quarterly updates in case you had any questions about the tech collaborative. So I put it in your packet. I don't know if you'd have any questions specifically. It's more just to keep you informed about what's going on there. So if you do have questions, since it was so late, please feel free to email me separately, and I'll get any answers to you about that if you have questions, because I know you didn't have a chance to look at that.
Thank you. We always hear about tech, but I don't know much about it. So.
No, and I wasn't getting this type of an update to share out in the past, so I will continue to bring those. And the same with Accept. I'll bring you any updates on that as well.
The only question I had was about, she was talking about their user agreements with student data privacy, and I just wanted to make sure that that was in line, and I'm sure it is, with what with the kind of things that Dan has been advocating for as well.
So that's been around for how long now, Keith, right? That
Since Keith was.
a number of years. That's been
I
happening,
just
but-
didn't know that they were highlighting it as something that they were, trying to work on those privacy agreements, and
I will
that's something
check with Dan, because I know I sent him to talk with
Yeah.
them again, too, so he may have an update on that. I'll double check with him and see if there's any changes. I will say, related to that, though, Dan, that's why he wants to come to policy and talk about
Yeah.
AI and see if we can update our acceptable use policy to incorporate some of that language, so we'll be sharing that in the future as well, but I will get you an answer on that, Cynthia. And that's all I have.
Great. Dr. Bernard?
We are busy planning our January 31st PD day. Just to remind everyone, it is a full day, so students are not within their buildings. We have a very active day planned. I will give you more details as we get closer. That's it.
Great. Mr. Boudet?
I have nothing, thank you.
Done enough damage for the night.
Absolutely.
Reports from the subcommittee, communications.
We are finding a time to meet early this month.
Okay. Policy?
Same.
Okay. Budget?
Budget had a meeting yesterday, and we got updates on some of our capital projects, including the roof in the high school auditorium wall. And let's see, there was also some preliminary discussion about the MSBA roof application. We also went over facilities usage rental, but I see that's down on the agenda a little farther. Air conditioning, we talked about how it would almost be like a study or evaluation, which would have a cost in order to get an estimate. So we are looking into other ways to go about that, but that is part of an ongoing agenda item for budget.
To do a full sort of evaluation of the lower schools
The
campus
Woodland campuses.
would be over $50,000 to really to build and design a solution, which then would come with a very large cost. So we're trying to find ways of sort of getting rough ideas of what it would cost without that expense. And then on the MSBA, so we've talked about the lower schools, the flat roofs, to fix those would be in the $6 million sort of ballpark, and so we're looking at different solutions. The MSBA did just reinitiate their rapid, accelerated roof repair program, which had been sort of stagnant since COVID, I guess. And so now that's back on. That's another option for getting the state to hopefully.
It has an earlier deadline than the SOI. Right. It might even be as early as March 1st. So that's going to be something we're going to continue to look into, along with like the green solar roof projects. But we haven't seen those applications open up either. So we feel like it's probably best course to look at both programs.
Is there any risk if we're submitting two different programs one would be. I know it's for a different building, but.
Yeah.
Different building.
Hasn't opened, so the Green Roof Project hasn't opened up for applications yet. We have plenty of roofs that are in need of.
We do. That's- yeah.
But they're two different programs, they're two different routes, and districts do submit multiple SOIs at the same time, correct?
Well,
Do
this is,
they? That's what I'm
the
asking.
accelerated repair program is different than the
Is
SOI
different.
piece of it. But they are, because
But
it's
if
two
we
different buildings.
But if we do an accelerated repair, then
Yep.
we can't actually apply for an SOI for any new building for like a decade or something. There's some
Are you talking
restriction.
about?
Oh, for that.
For Woodland Street campus?
Yes.
We wouldn't be. We wouldn't be. There,
Okay.
those buildings, enough of them are new.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I mean,
ish.
Plastino is completely new. Miller has probably
25 years is not
25%
new,
space.
saying.
The middle school is probably 3/4 new. So again, we wouldn't be looking at replacing the buildings.
Okay.
And again, the cost for those.
I mean, the
roofs is
the education.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying, if you look at the educational spaces like at the middle school, those were new spaces, all the classrooms. Here, again, we are the exact, if you look at the plans from 1967, I think it is, when this building was designed, the rooms are all the same. There's a couple of hallways that have moved, and it's just about it. So
Right.
it's not very different at all.
And then we anticipate another budget meeting in advance of our next general school committee meeting of January 18th. We just don't have a date yet.
And then for Superintendent's eval, Minnie just got back from her trip, and we'll be working to get a date set up soon. Anything else from subcommittees? Okay. Old business, I think Dr. Kuska addressed the update from the Coalition Against Hate and Bias, as well as the Equity Audit Steering Committee, unless there's anything else.
Anything else to add?
So on to C, which is the facility usage. I know that was also for the high school auditorium. I know that was also a budget item.
It's something that we had addressed in budget. There was a opportunity to have rental income on the weekend after school ends. So school right now, without any snow days, ends, what is it, around June 14th. And I think there was a rental opportunity for that weekend after. And we were kind of assessing costs and auditorium use and what that would mean in terms of cleaning and someone to help with the lights and soundboard and all of that. So getting a rate out, are we ready to move forward with?
I've reached out to the person interested in in doing this and trying to get some more real specifics. I got to hone this down to very specific, like, this time to this time on such and such a date. And so I'm working on that now. So when I get the real specifics, I'll be able to then figure out what types of support we need to provide for our needs, and then what types of supports they would need for their needs, and they kind of package it all together. So that's in the process.
Do you want a vote from us to sort of authorize you to do this? Do you think you need that?
Or do you want?
I would say, since when we discussed this, we were talking about it kind of being a pilot situation. Yep. So, again, I think what maybe if, I don't necessarily need a vote because it wouldn't necessarily be something that's permanent. We're going to see if this is something that works for us. What I can certainly do is keep you apprised. We meet often enough, keep you apprised of what I found out about the needs they have, and then apply what I believe would be a fair rate for us to go down into this. Whether I wouldn't want to make it something permanent, just like we didn't do that with the bathrooms outside yet, because we really kind of wanted, we needed to play around with it a little bit before we really had a feel for what it takes.
No, not looking to make it permanent. I was just wondering if you just to sort of the committee to weigh in on being in favor of doing this.
We meet
guess
in 2 weeks, so I think that's
Okay.
be enough time. For us.
What do you think this is really even viable? I mean, how much availability do we have? We have nothing during the school year, so it would need to be something that is just over the summer? Is that what we're envisioning for this?
There are, one of the problems that it's a
Or
good
when
problem.
school's closed?
It's what I'm saying. It's a good problem to have. It's because our drama program and our performing arts
robust.
program
That's what I'm
has
saying.
been so
Yeah.
active and so involved and participating in so many things. It creates a lack of opportunity. Well, that's good because that's for our students and that's what it's there for.
Right.
We're looking to fill in around the gaps, kind of the old empty seats on a plane idea. If we have empty
Okay.
seats on this plane, if we have a mechanism to fill it that is
Right. As long
financially
as it
beneficial for us.
As long as it makes money. Yeah.
Exactly. This is not a
Otherwise,
break-even
the
cost thing.
trouble
This
is
is
just not worth it because-
because of wear and tear and stuff like that. So no,
Right.
if we can do it so that in a fashion that it's financially beneficial for the the taxpayers of Holliston, then we should go down that path. So
In the same way that we rent out the turf or other fields when
Right.
we have a priority
Right.
list and the students of
Yeah.
athletic here come first, right? But in that
Right.
same way, if it's available, right?
Yeah.
So there might be some opportunities here, but again, it's a trial basis.
Right. Okay.
Parks rents the turf. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, similar. I didn't say this.
They also put forward proposals to invest in our facility.
And they do. I have no qualms to go up with the way that works.
It's all coming from the same place.
It's at some level it all comes from the taxpayers.
It all comes from the taxpayers. Okay, good. So I'm glad that at least there's more conversation and we can try to see if something will work out. So we have on here just because, we did have a really substantive conversation on rankings 2 weeks ago, right before the holidays. I think this is something that we should probably continue to sort of discuss. Is there anything else that people want to talk about, especially sort of next steps, things that maybe we'd like to see in addition to what we saw? Thoughts on a dashboard, anything like that?
I think the information was helpful. I think we would be, it would be problematic if we just put the information out without following up on recommendations, continuing to look at the recommendations, tying it to plans for improvement for this year, for next year. I don't think it's a one-time conversation. So, but I also don't know that it's a conversation we're ready to have tonight. I definitely don't think it is. But
Right.
I think it should almost, if not on January 18th, the meeting after that, to revisit the recommendations with an eye on improvement over 1 year, 3 year, 5. I think we need to have some type of plan tied to it.
Yeah, so if I look at the next, so I know January 18th, we're doing priority needs prior to the meeting, and then Mr. List is going to come and present on NIA, so that's probably not a good night to do it. We're going to want to
Nope.
dig into
Good.
that. And then February 8th, is that the next one? Is that our goals meetings, our goals discussions? I don't have the schedule.
So that could be an opportunity then.
Do I have the dates backwards?
No, I'm just wondering whether, has this data gone through the administrative team, and if they've had any opportunity to kind of look at it to say, here's our exactly. So here's our recommendations about how, or whether we have recommendations that we want to follow, or whether we're saying, you know what, we're staying the course. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it would tie to goals, but I think it might be a lot to digest with that because it's 5 of us presenting that night. That's a lot.
Right.
That always takes us a lot. And I know February 29th is when Mr. McLeod is going to present on the AI steering committee. We're going to have an equity steering committee update,
Yeah.
but that's going to be a little bit later. So I guess if we could push it to early March, if that's not too late, that might be the better timing because then we would have gone through some of that. We could do something February 8th. I just don't know if we're going to have enough information to add to the conversation yet.
Could you at least send it, I mean, if it hasn't already gone to the administrative team, and have to give them some time to get some feedback back
should post it
preliminarily?
on the website.
Okay, good. I just didn't know if it had been something that had been discussed in your,
Yeah, we have not had the
Okay.
chance yet to discuss it, but I can
Yeah.
add that to our agenda. And then, so I'll let you think about it and then we can
Yeah.
decide.
We have all the recommendations that we had already made.
Right.
So is that what you're asking
haven't really-
to look at?
We didn't really flesh those out.
No, we
though. I
just-
guess
these
is what
were-
I'm
Yeah.
asking. It's
Right,
sort of, they
okay.
seem just sort of,
Because there's a lot of data we didn't.
I just wanted
Yeah.
to clarify
Really
what.
no, yeah, no, I understand.
And if it wasn't in communication yet with building-based administrators about those recommendations, we just thought that maybe we could add to them or support them better
Right.
with that conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, like I said, every 8 would be challenging to fit it all in, but I mean, we're willing to do whatever. Just be mindful of those at the presentation.
And then this might be a lot of work, and so not necessarily something to do now. But one thing I did sort of notice that could be interesting to look at would be performance of an individual class as you go through time for so the class of 2029's ELA scores over time to see, just to sort of track the class, if there were any changes made in curriculum, just as that may be something that you really need more of a.
And that's why we need a data
Yeah.
dashboard, to be honest, because that's been something I've been striving to get some data like that. We talk about our French immersion program, we talk about Montessori. We know that those programs are successful, but do we really have the data to prove it? You know what I mean? That's what I think has been a little bit lacking. We had that shift, as I talked about in the presentation, kind of not looking as closely at the data, and I think that's where we're trying to come to that kind of bringing the pendulum back to kind of the middle ground of looking at the data, looking at innovative teaching and learning, and then what do we notice, what's working, what's not, how can we refine that? So I think you're right, we should be doing that, and I think when we come to priority needs, you're going to hear us put that as part of our spiel for why we need a data dashboard, so you don't have to reinvent this wheel and do it manually, because as you know, it's so time consuming, and I think we could get you that data that you're looking for with that platform.
Yeah, let's definitely dig into that sort of thing and see what those solutions offer. What kind of larger data sets that we can get to sort of be able to slice and dice to sort of look at things. How much, what kind of data is out there that, because it's hard to necessarily match students up with different demographics and things like that. If we don't necessarily track all of them, but what can be done. Certainly tracking a French immersion student, a Montessori student, and a traditional student sort of through their career and showing if there are differences and where maybe there are ways of bolstering.
Yeah, and there is, that's where the student growth percentile on MCAS is helpful, because you get that 3-year trend, so you're looking at that from a little bit of longer range. You can break that down. I mean, we have the ability to go in and get that information by cohort, as far as like if you're looking at French immersion, but then only if they stayed in the same class with this, you know what I mean? So you'd have to lump, let's say, all French immersion programs together.
Oh, you mean if you moved from French immersion in second grade into the third grade, you were traditional? Yeah.
Yeah, all those things. So that's where it gets tricky, and that's why your own data dashboard, when you're looking at your kids in your district as they go along, it would help us.
But we get individual MCAS scores, right? So we could, in theory, you could create. Each year you could create the French immersion sort of program, and those kids would go in there, and then the next year one child moved out of the French immersion program.
Sure.
Yeah.
With the data dashboard.
Theoretically, you can.
Yeah.
With the data dashboard, you could do that much. I mean, I feel like that's what we've been talking about. You can, it would do it for you.
Yeah.
But we do have in theory, that data.
Yes, we would just have to do it manually.
We have to do it manually right now, which is then choosing individual.
Exactly. I mean,
It's very laborious.
the data that you get now from MCAS is better because you can get it by like the current class. For example, when I was first pulling data as assistant principal, I literally had to choose each kid so that the teacher could just see their own kid. Like I had to click on each kid and go through the whole class. So we don't have that problem anymore, but if we're going back over time, since we haven't done it, we would have to recreate it all.
It was a lot harder to find this a long time ago when I first started.
But I agree with you. I think that is a need that we have now. Because we want to be looking at not just MCAS as, like I always say, one snapshot. We need to be looking at our DIBEL scores as they go along, other literacy scores. We're talking about STAR assessments. If we're shifting from STAR, what's the other assessment, and be able to follow all of those assessments and paint a picture of how our students doing. I think you're going to hear the principals in February talk about the investment we've had in literacy, and that they're starting to see the payoff and the dividends on that. Our holistic investment in some of these programs from pre-K up to grade 8. So I'm excited that they're going to give you some updates on that. But again, we don't have access to have that data is readily available to show it to you as black and white right now.
I think we talked about this a little bit previously, but I'm wondering whether there's ways that we can capture any data from our former students. So students like who move on to school, whether we can get
College graduation
right,
rates
and
or
just
something?
not college graduation rates, but also just whether they have felt they were well prepared for school. Do they feel that they went on to college and they felt that the education that they got here prepared them well for their college experience wherever they went? So I'm curious as if there's any way that we can capture any of that from. I know it's kind of, I don't know if it's beyond our purview or not, but I just feel like it's,
I mean, I think if
because they're not, they're former students, they're not our students but now.
Well, we did start, and I asked Mr. List as he was entering last year about how are we collecting the emails, and so they were trying to capture the outside emails, because we also talked about trying to do something with college students returning,
Right.
which I don't think happened yet, but we did have a plan to do that.
Just kind of
Yeah, so I there is an ability moving forward to start doing that, whether they respond.
Sure.
But I think it's worth
I
doing.
think it's worth,
Yeah.
worth throwing it out there.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Mr. List about that and see if they still have those available.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, newsletter. No newsletter. Items of information, we did not get a chance to approve these minutes. I was sort of getting a little, I guess, ahead of myself when we were posting, but I wanted to make sure it was on there. But we'll get those minutes approved and shared with the committee. And that actually brings us to the end of our agenda. Our next meeting date is January 18th. We are an hour and 10 minutes early. We do have an executive session after this, but at this time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn from regular session into executive session, from which we will not return. We have two reasons. One, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. If an open meeting may have detrimental impact to the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and this is for strategy related to collective bargaining with the HFT. And then also reasons for discussing strategy with respect to threatened litigation against a district by a district employee.
Moved by Dawn?
Seconded by Cynthia?
That requires a roll call vote. Cynthia?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan? Yes. Thank you very much. We stand adjourned.